There's a question that, at some point, stirs quietly inside every human heart. A whisper at dawn, a restlessness in the middle of the night, a moment of pause while looking at the stars or sitting by a window, watching the rain fall in patterns only the soul seems to notice. That question is not always spoken aloud. It doesn't always take the shape of clear words, but it is there, pulsing beneath the distractions of daily life, beneath the endless stream of notifications, beneath the noise of survival. The question is simple, yet seismic. Is there something more? We scroll through feeds, binge-watch shows, attend meetings, pay bills, smile politely at strangers. But late at night, when the world grows quiet, there it is again. The haunting pull towards something deeper. A hunger for meaning. A need for connection. Not with another person, but with the source of all persons. Some call it God. Others call it the universe, the divine, the infinite, the great spirit, the first cause. Some refuse to call it anything at all, yet still feel the tremor of its presence. Wherever you stand, whether in faith, doubt, curiosity, or rebellion, this book was written for you. For the thinkers who have wrestled with logic, ethics, and metaphysics. For the hearts that have broken and wondered why. For the seekers who have meditated in silence, asking for a sign. For the skeptics who, though they deny, cannot shake the feeling that there's something unseen weaving through existence. This is not a book of dogma. It is not an instruction manual on how to live a perfect spiritual life, nor is it a set of rigid truths demanding your loyalty. It is a conversation, an invitation to explore, a bridge between ancient wisdom, modern philosophy, personal reflection, and one of the most audacious spiritual texts ever written, the Urantia Book. Maybe you've never heard of it. Maybe you've read a few pages and closed it, overwhelmed by its density. Or perhaps it's been sitting on your shelf for years, waiting for you to return. Whatever your relationship with it, or even if you have none at all, this journey won't require prior knowledge. We will borrow from Urantia's cosmic insights. We will blend it with the grounded reflections of Stoics, Buddhists, mystics, and existentialists. We will touch the ancient and the modern. We will walk through the forests of philosophy, stop by the rivers of science, and sit under the stars of spirituality. And most of all, we will keep it human, real, relevant, because the divine doesn't belong only in scriptures or lecture halls. It lives in the anxious heart of a teenager, in the trembling hands of someone burying a loved one, in the quiet determination of a single parent making breakfast before work, in the tears of both joy and loss. God, or whatever name resonates with you, has never been far away. It is only we who forget to look. Before we take the first step together, let me offer a simple request. Read this with your heart as much as with your mind. Where logic falters, let imagination lean in. Where doubt screams loud, let curiosity whisper louder still. Where fear closes doors, let wonder crack a window open. You don't have to believe everything written here. You don't have to agree with every philosophy. You only have to show up. Bring your questions. Bring your wounds. Bring your hope. The journey is long, but perhaps somewhere along the way, you'll hear the answer that was already waiting for you. Chapter 1, The Innate Search for the Divine. There is a yearning written into the blueprint of every human soul. It stirs when we look at a newborn child and feel a love so vast it scares us. It hums in the silence after heartbreak, when everything feels hollow. It rises at the edge of the ocean, staring at waves that seem to breathe like a living thing. It flickers in hospital waiting rooms and at mountaintops during moments of both despair and awe. Whether in moments of joy or agony, reflection or confusion, one question keeps emerging in different forms. Why am I here? The existential dilemma is as old as consciousness itself. We build careers, families, reputations. We set goals, chase dreams, accumulate possessions. And yet, in the quiet corners of the mind, beneath all external achievements, another hunger whispers. Is this all there is? Some suppress the question, drowning in distraction. Others intellectualize it, turning to philosophy, psychology, or neuroscience for answers. Some rebel against the mere notion of higher purpose, embracing nihilism as both shield and sword. But regardless of the paths we take, the question remains like gravity for the soul, an invisible pull towards something greater. Why do humans seek God? Is it fear of death? A longing for cosmic justice? A desperate hope that someone is keeping score, making sense of chaos? Perhaps. But perhaps there's something deeper. Some philosophers argue that this search is a biological survival mechanism, an evolutionary trait that kept tribes together under shared beliefs. Others say it's purely psychological, a response to the terror of mortality. But then, how do we explain the moments that defy logic? The tears shed by an atheist watching a sunset, the overwhelming love felt by someone holding their child for the first time, the stranger who stops to help, without reason or reward. Maybe this search for God is not about fear, but about longing. A longing to return to something we once knew, but forgot. Carl Jung called it the God archetype, an inherited blueprint inside the collective unconscious, urging us to seek something transcendent. Buddha described it as the end of suffering, the release from the endless cycles of desire and ignorance. Soren Kierkegaard spoke of a leap of faith, the acceptance that reason alone cannot bring peace. And somewhere in between psychology, philosophy, and spirituality, countless human beings throughout history have paused long enough to wonder. What if I was designed to search because there is something to find? This longing has built cathedrals and monasteries, temples and mosques. It has driven pilgrims across deserts, monks into caves, and poets into sleepless nights. It is in the songs we sing, the prayers we whisper, the questions we scribble in journals no one else will read. And for each seeker, the journey takes a different shape. Some follow rituals, some meditate in silence, some study the sciences, believing that understanding the universe is, in itself, a way of touching God. Some curse the sky and demand answers. Some simply sit in the dark, waiting for a presence they can't explain. And here, at this crossroad of longing and logic, stands you, the reader. Your reasons for opening this book are your own. Maybe you're searching for comfort, maybe for truth, maybe for both. Whatever your reason, this journey is not about arriving at a single, absolute answer. It is about walking with the questions gently and persistently until something shifts inside, until that subtle recognition dawns, that perhaps the one you're searching for has been searching for you too. Across continents and centuries, humanity has crafted countless names, images, and stories in its attempt to describe the indescribable. In the East, Hindu philosophy speaks of Brahman, the ultimate, unchanging reality, beyond all descriptions and attributes. God, in this view, is both immanent and transcendent, present within every atom and yet far beyond comprehension. In Buddhism, while the language of God is often absent, the search continues, redirected toward the cessation of suffering and the realization of nirvana, that timeless, formless state of liberation. In the West, Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle approached the divine as the unmoved mover, or the good, the perfect and eternal source from which all things emanate. Their logic pointed toward a necessary cause, a foundational principle beyond time and space. The Stoics, meanwhile, embraced the concept of a universal logos, a rational, ordering force that permeates the cosmos, offering structure and meaning even in suffering. In the heart of the Middle East, the monotheistic traditions emerged. Judaism spoke of Yahweh, the ever-present I Am. Christianity expanded the view with the image of a loving Father, a God who not only created but cared intimately for his children. Islam revealed Allah, the all-knowing, all-compassionate one, merciful and majestic. And through all these paths, whether through sacred texts, philosophical treatises, or whispered prayers, humanity circled back to one universal truth. We are wired to seek connection with something greater, wiser, and more enduring than ourselves. But for all our efforts to define the divine, every tradition also holds a humbling truth. God cannot be confined by human language. The Tao Te Ching begins with, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." The mystics of every age echo the same caution. Once you try to describe the infinite, you risk shrinking it. And yet, we keep trying, not because we believe our words are enough, but because in the act of reaching, something within us awakens. It was during one of these personal seasons of spiritual questioning that I first encountered the Urantia Book, a thick volume with language as vast as the cosmos itself, filled with ideas that stretched both my intellect and my heart. It didn't read like any other spiritual text I'd seen before. It spoke of God not just as creator, but as universal Father, personal, intimate, infinitely loving, yet boundless in power and scope. It described the universe not as random chaos, but as a carefully orchestrated reality, where purpose flows from the top down, where divine intention seeps into every corner of existence. For someone raised on a diet of Western theology and dabbling in Eastern philosophy, Urantia offered a third path, one that wasn't about replacing old beliefs, but expanding them. A text that could hold the majesty of an unknowable God alongside the tenderness of a Father who knows your every thought. But let me be clear, this is not a book about converting anyone to the Urantia Book, nor is it a rigid commentary. Instead, consider this project a dialogue across traditions, a blending of spiritual wisdom from many sources, with Urantia as one of the guiding voices. As we journey through the next chapters, I'll reference its insights occasionally, not as absolute dictates, but as invitations to deeper thought. You don't need to agree with its cosmology. You don't even need to believe in God at this point. All I ask is that you stay curious. Let the ideas breathe around you. Let them challenge, inspire, or even unsettle you. After all, sometimes it's the questions that unsettle us the most that end up becoming the doorways to our greatest awakenings. And so, with heart open and mind engaged, we turn the page and begin. Chapter 2, God is Here, Omnipresence and Spiritual Intimacy. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words. You felt it before. In the stillness of early morning, when the world hasn't yet remembered its noise. In the gentle way light filters through your bedroom curtains. In the sudden pause between two heartbeats when, for reasons you can't explain, you feel watched. Not in the way that unsettles, but in the way that comforts. It's as if someone is present. Not outside, not in the sky, but here. Now, as close as breath, as quiet as thought, as intimate as memory, the Urantia Book speaks of this presence with a kind of daring intimacy. It describes God not as distant, aloof, or observing from galaxies away, It paints a portrait of a universal Father whose very essence permeates creation, whose spirit gently indwells every willing heart. The term it uses for this presence is poetic and provocative, God within you. And yet this idea isn't new. Long before Urantia's pages were written, humanity had already been sensing, naming, and trembling before the same truth. The mystics called it union. The Sufis spoke of it as divine nearness, the beloved whispering to the lover's soul. Christian contemplatives like Meister Eckhart and Saint Teresa of Avila spoke of God dwelling in the interior castle of the heart. The Hindu sages referred to Atman, the inner self, indivisible from Brahman, the cosmic source. The Stoics, with their rational elegance, described logos, the universal reason infused in all things. And then there's the soft, unmistakable echo in the Psalms. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? But while philosophies and faiths offer poetry and doctrine, the experience itself is far less tidy. Sometimes the presence of God feels like joy swelling for no reason at all, making you laugh in your car while waiting at a red light. Other times, it feels like an ache of longing, a tear you didn't expect while hearing a piece of music, watching a stranger help another, or holding someone's hand for the last time. It can appear in places as mundane as a grocery store aisle, or as sacred as a mountaintop at dawn. And more often than not, it arrives when you least expect. One cold winter afternoon, I remember standing in a crowded subway station. People rushing, trains screeching, announcements blaring overhead. I was exhausted, irritated, lost in my own trivial frustrations. And then it happened. A child, no more than 3 years old, broke free from his mother's grasp and started running toward me, giggling, eyes bright with mischief and joy. For a split second, time slowed. It was as if the entire scene paused to let me notice something. In that tiny moment, surrounded by strangers and noise, I felt it. Presence. The unmistakable sensation that I was seen, that I was loved, that I was not alone. The train arrived. The child returned to his mother. Life resumed, but something inside me had shifted. That was years ago, but the memory remains like a handprint on my soul. The Urantia Book explains that this is no accident. It teaches that the Father's Spirit is not confined to distant realms, but is actively participating in our personal journeys, patiently waiting for us to notice. It speaks of thought adjusters, fragments of God Himself, residing within each willing mortal, offering subtle guidance, quiet comfort, and endless love. Not as a force controlling us, but as a whisper, waiting for permission to become a conversation. Yet, let's pause here, because the idea of God's presence within can be both beautiful and terrifying. If God is here now in me, what does that mean for the parts of myself I'd rather hide? The anger, the envy, the small betrayals I excuse, the wounds I refuse to heal. But here lies the paradox. God doesn't inhabit us because we are perfect. God inhabits us because we are loved despite and through our imperfection. Just like the sun continues to shine on both the garden and the garbage heap, divine presence remains constant, whether we feel worthy or not. Across traditions, this presence has been described in countless ways. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." Christian mystics spoke of Christ living within. The Bhagavad Gita whispers of the divine seated in the heart of all beings. And in the Urantia Book, there is this quiet, staggering reminder. God is closer to you than your own breath. Not because we earned it, not because we said the right prayers, but simply because that's who God is. If you're willing, I invite you to pause. Right now, close your eyes for a moment. Take one deep, slow breath. Feel the air moving through your lungs. Feel your heart beating in your chest. And ask yourself, not with your mind, but with your soul, where did I feel the divine today? Was it in the smile of a stranger? The colors of the sky at dusk? The unexpected warmth in an ordinary moment? If the answer doesn't come immediately, that's okay. Sometimes the noticing comes later, when you're washing dishes, when you're walking to your car, when you're lying awake, thinking about this very sentence. Whenever it happens, trust this. God is here, always, waiting, whispering, loving, and with that truth alive in us, we continue our journey. Chapter 3, The Power That Sustains Everything, Loving Omnipotence. There's a certain comfort in believing someone is in control. Maybe that's why, as children, we clung to the belief that our parents had all the answers, that if something went wrong, they would fix it, that no matter how loud the storm outside, there was someone bigger, stronger, and more capable holding the structure of our little world together. But as we grow, reality chips away at that illusion. We realize our parents are human. Governments falter, leaders disappoint, plans unravel, and slowly, an unsettling question begins to form at the edges of consciousness. If no one down here is truly in control, is anyone up there? The Urantia Book answers with a resounding yes. But it offers that yes with a level of complexity and nuance that refuses to fit into the neat boxes of childhood belief. God, according to Urantia, is not just powerful. He is all-powerful, a presence of infinite energy, mind, and spirit, orchestrating the unimaginable expanse of the cosmos. Galaxies spin under his direction. Atoms vibrate by his decree. Planets orbit, stars ignite, and life unfolds in patterns that science is still barely beginning to understand. But here's the part that truly stirs the soul. His power is not cold. It is not mechanical. It is not distant. It is loving. This is where the narrative shifts. Because when we think of omnipotence, it's easy to imagine raw, unfiltered power, lightning bolts, earthquakes, divine commands that brook no disobedience. But the Urantia Book gently invites us to see differently. God's omnipotence is always in harmony with his love, his wisdom, and his eternal goodness. It is a power that chooses mercy, that favors growth, that allows freedom, even when that freedom means allowing us to make mistakes that hurt. The idea is both beautiful and maddening. Because if God is truly all-powerful, why doesn't he step in? Why doesn't he stop the war, prevent the accident, heal the disease, erase the pain? The Stoics, centuries before Urantia, grappled with similar questions. For them, the universe was governed by logos, a rational force, ensuring that everything happens according to a natural, divine order. The Stoic response to suffering wasn't to beg for escape. It was to cultivate acceptance, recognizing that the universe operates on a scale of wisdom far beyond human comprehension. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher once enslaved, wrote, "Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will find peace." There's a strange freedom in surrendering control. Not passive resignation, but active trust. Trust that there's a framework, a design, an intelligence holding all things, even the chaotic, even the painful, within a greater pattern of purpose. The Urantia Book echoes this. It speaks of a Father whose will is eternal, whose plans are made with full knowledge of every future possibility, whose actions flow not from whim, but from a wisdom that integrates the past, present, and future of all creation. To our finite minds, this orchestration often appears fragmented. We see only our small piece of the puzzle, the lost job, the heartbreak, the unanswered prayer. We sit in the waiting rooms of life, flipping through magazines of distraction, while behind the scenes, realities we cannot fathom are being aligned. And yet, the hurt feels real. The fear feels sharp. The nights are long. So how do we hold both truths at once? That God is all-powerful, and that suffering still exists? The answer isn't simple. It never has been. But perhaps it begins with a shift in how we view power itself. Real power doesn't always mean intervention. Sometimes it means presence, the strength to sit beside us in the fire, the quiet assurance woven into the very fabric of existence that this, too, is not the end of the story. Suffering tests theology in ways no academic debate ever could. It's one thing to speak of divine plans when life is smooth, when the bills are paid, the relationships are healthy, and the body feels strong. But when loss comes crashing through the door, when diagnosis replaces hope, when the person you love most walks away or breathes their last, suddenly, words like God's plan can feel hollow, even cruel. And yet, buried deep within our grief and confusion, another quiet question begins to rise. Could this pain somehow still be held within love? The Urantia Book doesn't offer cheap comfort here. It acknowledges the complexity of existence in time and space. It speaks of spiritual evolution, of soul building through struggle, of a God whose sovereignty allows for both freedom and consequence. It presents a universe where mortal beings, still growing in wisdom, are given space to choose, to learn, to stumble, and to rise again. The sovereignty of God, according to Urantia, is not the micromanagement of every molecule. It is the architectural structure within which freedom unfolds. Freedom, even to suffer. Freedom, even to doubt. Freedom, even to walk away. And yet, always freedom to return. The Stoics, too, believed that suffering was not random punishment, but an inevitable part of being human in a vast, ordered cosmos. They taught that our power lies not in changing what happens, but in changing how we meet what happens. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote in the solitude of his own pain-filled nights, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very thing we wish to escape may become the path toward growth. I remember a season of my own life when everything unraveled. A job I loved fell apart. A relationship I cherished dissolved. My health wavered. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering questions into the dark that never seemed to answer back. And yet, looking back now, I realized something profound was happening beneath the surface. Like muscles tearing before they grow stronger, like seeds breaking open before they bloom. Something in me was changing. I began to notice small things. The stranger who smiled at me on the train. The song on the radio that played at just the right moment. The sunrise that burned gold after a week of rain. They weren't fixes. They weren't solutions. But they were reminders. Reminders that I was not forgotten. That power didn't always look like rescue. Sometimes it looked like the strength to endure. Sometimes it looked like the grace to take one more step, even when I wasn't sure why. The Urantia Book frames this tension with startling clarity. God's omnipotence is not about shielding us from life, but about walking with us through it. It is the cosmic scaffolding that holds reality together, making sure that even when we fall, the ground beneath us remains solid. A Father whose love is so expansive that he grants us the freedom to fall, but whose power is so great that he ensures even the fall can become part of the ascent. So the next time you find yourself staring at a closed door, or clutching the fragments of a broken plan, or wondering if your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, pause, breathe. Remember, The same God who spins galaxies into existence is also holding the pieces of your heart, not with indifference, but with love, with wisdom, with power. Power that doesn't always prevent a storm, but always remains present within it. And with that truth pressing gently against the edges of our understanding, we step forward toward the next unfolding chapter of this journey. Chapter 4, God Knows, Omniscience and the Meaning of Life. There's a peculiar kind of vulnerability that comes with being known, truly known, not the version of ourselves we curate for the world, not the social media highlight reel or the polite answers we give at dinner parties, but the raw, unfiltered, trembling core of who we really are. The secret fears, the selfish thoughts, the moments we said one thing but meant another, the memories we replay at night, wondering if we could have chosen differently, and then the deeper truths, the quiet acts of kindness no one saw, the love we gave when it hurt to give, the silent prayers whispered from places of both faith and desperation. What if every layer of us was seen? Every contradiction, every beauty, every failure, every hope. And what if that knowledge wasn't met with condemnation, but with understanding? The Urantia Book offers a breathtaking perspective on divine knowing. It describes God as the first source and center, whose consciousness envelopes the entire universe, yet simultaneously attends to the smallest details of each individual life. There is no moment too insignificant, no thought too fleeting, no emotion too trivial to escape the awareness of the Universal Father. The book says, God knows all things. His consciousness is universal and his understanding infinite. This is not a detached surveillance. This is not cold data collection. This is an intimate, loving awareness, a knowing that holds space for our process, our confusion, our growth. But here arises the ancient paradox, the question that philosophers and theologians have wrestled with for centuries. If God knows everything, do we still have free will? If the divine already knows the choices we'll make, are those choices truly ours? It's a question that's haunted classrooms and cathedrals alike. A question that seems to pit two cherished ideas against each other: God's perfect knowledge and human freedom. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher and theologian, wrestled with this tension. He spoke of the leap of faith, suggesting that at some point we must embrace the mystery rather than demand its resolution. For Kierkegaard, the fact that we experience anxiety in decision-making is itself proof of our freedom, proof that we stand at the crossroads with real power to choose. On the other side of the philosophical spectrum, Jean-Paul Sartre declared that existence precedes essence, that we are not born with predetermined purposes, and it is through our choices that we define who we become. Sartre rejected any divine blueprint, seeing freedom as radical, terrifying, and absolute. And yet, even Sartre's vision, though godless, acknowledges something profound. We are meaning makers. We act. We choose. We stand at the edge of possibility day after day. So, where does this leave us? The Urantia Book seems to offer a third path. It suggests that God's foreknowledge does not negate our freedom, because divine knowledge exists outside the linear constraints of time. God sees all possibilities, every fork in the road, every potential path, yet never forces our hand. To us, life feels like a sequence: past, present, future. To God, all moments exist in a kind of eternal now. Imagine standing atop a mountain, looking down at a winding river. From your vantage point, you can see where the river bends, where it narrows, where it widens again. The people rowing in the boats below still experience each twist as it comes. They choose when to steer left or right. But you, from above, see the whole journey without ever controlling their oars. This perspective doesn't answer every philosophical riddle, but it does offer comfort, because it means that our choices matter, that our mistakes are real, but so are our redemptions, that our struggles are seen and our victories celebrated. God's omniscience isn't a trap. It's a safety net woven with love, a quiet assurance that even when we fail, even when we turn the wrong way, even when we forget who we are still known, still held, still loved. The idea that God knows everything about us is both terrifying and comforting. It means there's no place to hide, not from our darker instincts, not from our private doubts, not from the moments we betray our own ideals. But it also means we're never invisible, not in our grief, not in our quiet acts of courage, not even in our smallest victories that go unnoticed by the world. We live in a culture that teaches us to perform, to show only the polished versions of ourselves, to present curated identities, to mask the broken parts. But what if there's a gaze that sees past all that? A gaze that peers beneath the masks, into the trembling center where all our questions live. And more than that, what if that gaze doesn't flinch? What if God knows us at our worst and loves us still? In the Urantia Book, this knowing is described not as cold observation, but as perfect understanding intertwined with infinite compassion. God isn't watching us like a dispassionate observer tallying our moral scorecard. He is present, invested, woven into the fabric of our becoming. This is a God who understands the struggle of free will because he designed it, who witnesses every hesitant step toward growth and holds space for our failures without withdrawing his love. This perspective is echoed in many traditions. The psalmist cried out, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." The Upanishads whisper of the Paramatman, the inner witness, dwelling within all beings, seeing all, knowing all. Even the Stoics, though less personal in their language, spoke of the logos, the rational order that governs the universe, knowing both the cosmic and the intimate. And yet, for all the beauty of this idea, one lingering question remains. If God knows I will stumble, why let me walk? Why offer freedom at all, knowing how often we misuse it? Kierkegaard would answer, because love requires freedom. A relationship without choice is not love, it is coercion. Sartre, though coming from a different metaphysical view, would agree that freedom is the most terrifying and sacred of all human conditions. We are, he said, condemned to be free, left to create meaning where none is imposed. But perhaps, seen through the lens of divine omniscience, we are not condemned to be free. We are entrusted with freedom. God knows every choice we will make, but still allows us to make them. Not because he delights in our failure, but because growth demands authenticity. There's a strange kind of liberation that comes with this realization. If God already knows my weaknesses, if he already sees my contradictions, if none of my hidden corners are truly hidden, then maybe I don't have to hide from myself anymore. Maybe I can stop performing. Maybe I can let go of the exhausting charade of perfection. Maybe I can finally stand, trembling and real, before the divine, and whisper, "This is me, all of me, and still I am loved." And so, I'll leave you with a question, not to be answered quickly, not to be solved with logic, but to sit with, to breathe into. What would I do if I truly believed that God understands me completely? Would I speak more kindly to myself? Would I forgive more easily? Would I take bolder steps toward my purpose? Would I stop hiding my questions, my fears, my longings? Let that question linger. Let it stretch across your day. Let it become the beginning of a conversation between you and the one who already knows. Chapter 5, An Unlimited God. the infinite generosity of the source. There's something inherently human about imagining limits. We measure, we categorize, we quantify, we assign beginnings and endings, boundaries and borders, definitions and dimensions. We ask how much, how far, how long. It's how we survive in a world of finite resources. We ration energy, protect time, preserve love for those we deem worthy. And perhaps because of this, we unconsciously project the same limitations onto God. We imagine a divine source operating like us. We wonder, how much love does God have for me, really? We ask, is there enough grace for this mistake, for this failure, for this question I'm too afraid to ask aloud? But the truth is, our human language will always tremble and fracture at the edges when trying to describe the nature of an unlimited God. The Urantia Book challenges our small definitions. It speaks of a deity whose capacity to give is never exhausted, whose energy remains whole even after endless outpourings, whose wisdom, power, and love remain untouched by the act of giving. It offers a breathtaking image, a God who creates galaxies, bestows fragments of himself into human minds, sustains universal gravity, and yet is never diminished. It says, God's distribution of himself does not deplete his essence. Think about that. The universe could continue to expand. Millions of new worlds could blossom into being. Billions more could awaken to life and consciousness. And still, the divine source would remain as full, as radiant, as unchanging in love as before. Eastern philosophies have long hinted at this same boundlessness. The Tao Te Ching speaks of the Tao as an eternal flow, a source that gives without exhaustion, creates without depletion. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up, it says. In Hindu thought, Brahman is described as the unmanifested totality, both the source and the substance of all that is. The Upanishads echo this, suggesting that Brahman dwells within all things, and yet remains beyond all things, simultaneously immanent and transcendent. And then there's the language of metaphor, the only language that comes close to pointing at the infinite. We say God is like a fountain, endlessly overflowing, never running dry. We say God is like the sun, radiating warmth and light without ever depleting itself. We say God is like the ocean, vast beyond comprehension, with waves that touch every shore, but whose depth and volume remain untouched by the reaching. But even these metaphors falter, because at some point, every image we craft will shrink in comparison to the reality it tries to describe. We are, after all, finite beings reaching toward the infinite. And yet, the act of reaching matters. The act of imagining more than we can fully grasp opens a space within us, a space where all begins. To understand the infinite generosity of the source, sometimes it helps to step outside of words altogether, to move beyond definitions, to let go of doctrine, and to lean into something older than language, experience. The Taoists would say that the Tao cannot be named because naming limits. They teach that the very moment we attempt to contain it in syllables, it slips through our grasp like water between fingers. The Tao is not a being that gives, pauses, and then gives again. It is the giving itself, an unbroken flow, effortless, endless. Likewise, in Hinduism, Brahman is not simply the source of all things, it is all things. The breath in your lungs, the thought in your mind, the space between moments, the love between two people, the emptiness and the fullness all at once. To contemplate Brahman is to recognize that you are both the wave and the ocean, both seeker and sought, both question and answer. The Urantia Book, while distinct in voice and cosmology, aligns with this universal intuition. It describes God's creative outpouring as something that never lessens him. It invites us to imagine a deity so expansive, so unlimited, that he can give all of himself to each individual being without ever withholding from the next. This is abundance in its purest form. Not just material abundance, but emotional abundance, spiritual abundance, existential abundance, the abundance of second chances, the abundance of breath after breath, the abundance of mornings that follow nights that we feared would never end. Think of the sun for a moment. It does not choose who receives its light. It doesn't ration warmth based on merit. It simply shines, continuously, unapologetically, without concern for whether we notice or not. The same can be said of the divine. Even when we're blind to it, even when we're angry at it, even when we doubt its presence altogether, the giving continues. So how do we live in awareness of this limitless generosity? How do we tune our hearts to the frequency of abundance, especially in a world that often feels like it's built on scarcity? The answer isn't in forcing belief. It's in slowing down enough to notice, to pause long enough to see the small gifts hidden inside ordinary moments. The laughter of a friend, the feel of sunlight on your skin, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, the silence between heartbeats that still holds you alive, here now. If you're willing, I invite you into a simple exercise. Wherever you are, pause. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Soften the muscles behind your eyes. Take one slow, deep breath in, and then release. Now, gently bring to mind 3 moments, just 3, from the past day that felt like gifts. They don't have to be big. A smile, a favorite song on the radio, the scent of coffee in the morning. Let each one linger in your awareness for a few seconds longer than feels natural. Let yourself feel, not just that these moments happened, but that they were given, freely, lovingly, abundantly. And as you open your eyes or shift back into your day, carry this thought with you. You live inside a flow that never ends. A flow that existed long before you took your first breath and will continue long after your last. You are surrounded, held, nourished, sustained, not because you earned it, but because that is the nature of the source. And with that truth blooming quietly in your heart, we move forward toward the next unfolding. Chapter 6, Law, Order, and Love, the Supreme Will. There's a quiet reassurance in the idea that life has structure, that beneath the swirling chaos of traffic lights and missed deadlines, heartbreaks and late-night conversations, there exists a kind of cosmic architecture, an invisible scaffolding holding reality together. Some call it natural law, some speak of universal order. Some, like the Urantia Book, name it the Supreme Will. However we describe it, the longing is the same. We want to believe that existence is not random, that somewhere behind the scenes of our personal dramas and collective history, a deeper logic is unfolding. Not a cold, mechanical determinism, but a will that is both lawful and loving, structured yet compassionate, firm yet infinitely patient. According to the Urantia Book, the supreme will of the Universal Father is the very bedrock upon which all creation rests. Every orbit of a planet, every cycle of a season, every moral intuition that stirs within the human heart, all of it flows from this primal source of intention and order. This is not the kind of law written on parchment or legislated in government halls. It is the original, timeless law woven into the very fabric of reality. It is the reason gravity holds planets in place. It is the unseen rhythm that allows galaxies to dance across the cosmos in harmonious balance. And more intimately, it is the voice within that whispers, choose good, seek justice, act with compassion. Centuries before Urantia's revelation, philosophers grappled with this idea. Aristotle spoke of telos, the inherent purpose within every being. For him, everything in nature had a goal, a final cause, a reason for being. A seed strives toward becoming a tree. A river moves toward the sea. And humanity, according to Aristotle, strives toward eudaimonia, a flourishing life characterized by virtue. He believed that ethics wasn't about following imposed rules, but about aligning oneself with one's deepest nature and purpose. To act virtuously, then, was to act in accordance with the order already inscribed within the self, an order that reflected, in some mysterious way, the larger order of the universe. Kant, centuries later, would take a different path to a similar destination. For Kant, morality was not about cosmic harmony or natural purposes. It was about duty, an inner command, the famous categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. In simpler terms, before making a choice, ask yourself, what if everyone did this? Kant believed that within each human being existed a moral law as certain and binding as any physical law governing the stars. His famous line still echoes. Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Both Aristotle and Kant, though divided by time, geography, and philosophical frameworks, touch the same mystery, that human beings carry within them a compass pointing towards something higher. That moral choice is not random. That goodness is not subjective whim, but a response to something larger, older, and truer than ourselves. The Urantia Book deepens this by naming the source behind that compass, the Universal Father, whose will is not only supreme, but also intensely personal. The law of the cosmos is not detached from love. It is love expressed as order. And in that realization, something stirs. A sense of responsibility, a calling to live differently. It's easy to speak of cosmic order when gazing at galaxies or studying the laws of physics. It's far harder when standing at the crossroads of a simple, human decision. The truth is, most of us don't encounter moral dilemmas in dramatic courtroom scenarios or high-stakes negotiations. We meet them quietly in the small, ordinary moments of everyday life. When we choose whether to return the extra change the cashier gave us by mistake. When we decide whether to answer a friend's call late at night, knowing they're hurting, even though we're exhausted. When we hold back words of anger, or choose to speak up when silence feels safer. The law of the cosmos is not distant from these moments. It lives inside them. The Urantia Book reminds us that the supreme will is not just written into the stars, but inscribed upon the human heart. It urges us toward fairness. It nudges us toward kindness. It compels us to take the higher road, even when no one is watching. Ethical living, then, is not about grand gestures. It's about the tiny, consistent choices that shape the soul. Aristotle would say that virtue becomes a habit, formed through repetition. That character is built choice by choice, like drops filling a jar. Kant would add that every choice is a declaration of the kind of universe we wish to inhabit. That every time we choose integrity over convenience, we participate in building a moral world, not just for ourselves, but for others. In the Urantia Book, it brings both ideas together in a cosmic embrace. It speaks of personality survival, soul evolution, and the gradual unfolding of God's purpose within each individual life. Our daily decisions, no matter how small, become the soil in which eternity plants its seeds. I remember once standing at a crosswalk, watching an elderly woman struggle with her grocery bags. There was a split-second hesitation. I was running late. I had somewhere important to be, but then, without overthinking, I moved toward her, offering help. She smiled with a gratitude so pure it felt like sunlight breaking through cloud. That wasn't just about kindness. It was about listening to something deeper, something eternal. Recognizing divine law in our daily lives doesn't require theological training or philosophical expertise. It requires attention, presence. Willingness. It's in the quiet check we feel before speaking a harsh word. It's in the warmth that follows when we choose to forgive. It's in the strange peace that comes after doing the right thing, even when it costs us something. Divine law is not imposed from the outside. It's awakened from within, a soft, persistent echo of the supreme will, reminding us, you are part of something larger. You were made for this kind of goodness. And every choice matters. So before we move on, pause and ask yourself, how do I recognize divine law in my everyday life? Is it in moments of conscience? Is it in the pang of guilt after a wrong decision? Is it in the satisfaction of kindness, the pull toward truth, the resistance against cruelty? Let that question settle. Let it follow you into your next decision. Let it become a lens through which you begin to see that law, order, and love are not separate forces. They are different faces of the same divine will. And with that realization blooming, we step forward into what comes next. Chapter 7, God at the Center, the Sovereignty of Love. There is something both terrifying and beautiful about surrender. We spend much of our lives trying to control things, our schedules, our relationships, our futures. We map out plans. We set alarms. We fill calendars with color-coded appointments as if certainty were something we could write in ink. But then a life happens. A job is lost. A diagnosis arrives. A friend leaves. A chapter closes before we're ready. And in those moments, when the scaffolding of our plans collapses, we are left staring at a reality too big for us to manage. We are left staring at sovereignty. The Urantia Book speaks of God's sovereignty with a kind of quiet majesty, not as the sovereignty of a distant monarch, ruling with cold detachment, but as the intimate, deliberate sovereignty of a father who holds both galaxies and heartbeats in the same gentle regard. God's authority, according to Urantia, is not expressed in forceful domination, but in the loving maintenance of order, in the purposeful unfolding of existence, in the assurance that no moment, no tear, no prayer falls outside of divine awareness and care. This is sovereignty as love in action. It's the steady hand on the wheel of the universe, even when storms rage. To understand this fully, we must contrast it with another worldview, one that has shaped many modern minds, deism. Deism imagines God as the great clockmaker, the one who built the cosmic machinery, wounded up, and then stepped away. In the deistic vision, God observes but does not intervene. He watches but does not speak. He exists but remains untouched by human suffering. For some, this offers comfort, a universe of laws, predictable and stable. But for others, especially in moments of crisis, it feels like abandonment. We long for something more personal, more involved, more present. This is where Urantia's voice grows bold. It proclaims that God is not distant, not passive, not watching from behind some cosmic glass wall. The Universal Father is described as actively engaged with creation, intimately aware of each unfolding story, each broken heart, each silent hope. And at the center of this engagement stands one unshakable force: love. Not love as sentiment, not love as fleeting emotion, but love as agape, the universal, unconditional, endlessly giving force that upholds reality itself. This love does not fluctuate based on our moods. It does not withdraw when we fail. It does not grow weary of our doubts. It remains constant, present, faithful. Somewhere between the cold mechanics of the deist clockwork universe and the chaotic uncertainty of human experience lies a middle ground, a place where God is not an absent architect, nor a puppeteer pulling strings, but a living presence woven into the fabric of every unfolding moment. The Urantia Book offers this vision with quiet conviction. It describes a God who governs with patience, acts with compassion, and guides with an understanding far beyond our perception of time and consequence. Divine sovereignty, in this light, is not about control. It's about relationship. The relationship between the Creator and the created, between infinite power and finite choice, between the perfection of heaven and the messiness of earth. And at the center of this relationship always is love. Not earned, not conditional, not distributed based on performance, but given, freely, completely. I once spoke with a friend going through one of the most difficult seasons of her life. She had just lost her job, ended a long-term relationship, and was facing a move to a new city where she knew almost no one. Sitting across from me at a coffee shop, her voice trembled as she asked, "What am I supposed to do when everything I trusted falls apart?" I didn't have the kind of answer that fixes things, but I shared with her what I had learned and what I was still learning. That sometimes the sovereignty of God does not mean the absence of chaos, but the presence of love inside the chaos. That sometimes the most sacred act of trust is not believing that things will quickly get better, but believing that you won't walk through them alone. That even in the confusion of closed doors and endings we didn't choose, there's a hand, unseen but real, guiding the next steps. Agape, love, does not erase struggle. It enters into it with us. It does not prevent every heartbreak. It stays beside us in the aftermath. It does not guarantee smooth paths. It promises presence on rocky ones. And perhaps that is what true sovereignty looks like. Not the kind that erases human freedom or rewrites every circumstance for comfort, but the kind that whispers in our deepest nights. You are still held. You are still seen. You are still loved. And this chapter is not the end. So the next time you find yourself standing on the threshold of something unknown, when you feel the pull of fear or the weight of uncertainty, pause and breathe this truth deep into your soul. The one at the center of all things is not watching from a distance. He is here, now, with you, and his sovereignty is love. Chapter 8, The Purpose of Suffering, a Call to Growth. There are questions that appear only in the middle of the night, when the world grows quiet and the distractions fall away, when the house is dark and there's nothing left but breath, heartbeat, and thought. It's in those moments, raw, unfiltered, and honest, that we often ask, why does it have to hurt so much? Pain feels like betrayal, as though life itself has broken some unspoken promise. We grow up believing, or at least hoping, that goodness should shield us from suffering, that love should protect us from loss, that faith should guarantee smooth paths. But life, in its relentless honesty, teaches us otherwise. The Urantia Book offers a perspective that does not erase the reality of suffering, but reframes it. It speaks of a universe built for growth, where the development of the soul is the highest priority. According to Urantia, adversity is not a punishment, nor a random cruelty inflicted by an indifferent cosmos. It is an invitation, an opportunity for the human spirit to evolve, to stretch beyond its current boundaries, to awaken capacities for resilience, compassion, and faith that would remain dormant without challenge. This is a universe, Urantia says, where struggle plays a sacred role, where every difficult season becomes fertile ground for qualities that comfort could never produce. The Stoics, in their own language, echoed this understanding. They believed that suffering was inevitable, but misery was optional. That while we cannot control external events, we retain complete authority over our internal response. Epictetus, who lived much of his life as a slave, wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." For the Stoics, pain was a training ground. a forge where virtue was tested and strengthened. To them, life was less about avoiding hardship and more about becoming the kind of person who could meet it with dignity and wisdom. The universe, they taught, is not cruel for placing obstacles in our path. The obstacles are the path. There's something deeply human in this reframing. It shifts the narrative from "why me?" to "what is this asking of me?" From victimhood to agency, from despair to possibility. And though Urantia and Stoicism speak from different vantage points, one from cosmic revelation, the other from rational philosophy, both converge on this single, uncomfortable, liberating truth. Growth often comes wrapped in discomfort, sometimes profound discomfort. There are moments in life when pain arrives without knocking, when plans unravel, when relationships fracture, when the future, once full of color, fades into shades of gray. It's in these moments that philosophy can feel like theory and spirituality can feel distant. But even here, perhaps especially here, lies the doorway to something deeper. The Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, stood at the crossroads of unimaginable suffering and chose to ask a different kind of question. Locked inside a concentration camp, stripped of freedom, health, and dignity, he searched for the one thing that could never be taken from him: his ability to choose his response. Frankl's groundbreaking work, Man's Search for Meaning, emerged not from textbooks or lecture halls, but from the blood and dust of real human suffering. His conclusion was as simple as it was profound. Those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Frankl believed that pain, when given meaning, could become a catalyst for inner transformation. He observed that people who survived the camps with their humanity intact were often those who found purpose, even in agony. Some held on to the hope of seeing loved ones again. Some committed themselves to small acts of kindness for fellow prisoners. Some simply decided to endure one day at a time, to bear witness for the world outside. Meaning, he taught, could not erase suffering, but could transform it. It could turn it from a senseless wound into a space for growth, courage, and compassion. The Urantia Book, in its cosmic language, echoes this theme. It speaks of a universe where mortal beings progress through experience, where the challenges of life serve as spiritual training grounds, preparing the soul for higher levels of existence. Adversity, according to Urantia, is not an accident. It is part of the design, an opportunity for each individual to develop the qualities needed for the next stages of their eternal journey. It does not glorify suffering. It does not romanticize pain. But it reminds us we are more than our circumstances, that within each trial lies the potential for soul expansion. In this light, suffering stops being a cosmic mistake and becomes something else entirely. A classroom, a crucible, a sacred, painful invitation to become more, to become kinder, stronger, more empathetic, more aware of the invisible threads that connect all living beings. So here's an invitation for you now. Find a quiet place, a notebook, a piece of paper, or even the Notes app on your phone, and ask yourself this, without rushing for easy answers. What have I learned from my greatest pains? Not, why did they happen? Not, who's to blame? Not, how can I forget them? But simply, what did these moments teach me? About life? About love? About myself? Let the answers come softly. Let them surprise you. And as you write, know that every word, every tear, every remembered scar is part of your growth, part of your becoming, part of a larger story still unfolding, guided by a love that wastes nothing, not even your suffering. Chapter 9, Freedom and Responsibility, the Power of Free Will. There's a strange kind of weight that comes with freedom. At first glance, we imagine freedom as release, a breaking of chains, a breath of fresh air, an escape from limitations. But when freedom arrives in its purest form, it doesn't always feel light. It feels heavy, because with freedom comes choice, and with choice comes responsibility. Suddenly, we are not just passengers in the story of our lives. We are authors. We are architects. We are accountable. The Urantia Book speaks of free will as one of the most sacred gifts bestowed upon mortal beings. It describes how the Universal Father, in his sovereignty, chose not to create a universe of automatons, but of individuals with the power to choose, to love by decision, to pursue truth by volition, to participate consciously in their own evolution. And yet, alongside this gift, another truth hums quietly. Divine will remains. God's purposes continue. The supreme intention is not lost. So how do these two forces, human freedom and divine will, coexist without contradiction? How can we truly be free when God remains sovereign? Kierkegaard wrestled with this very tension. For him, human freedom was both a gift and a source of existential anxiety. He described it as standing on the edge of a cliff, where every choice felt like a dizzying leap into the unknown. Anxiety, he wrote, is the dizziness of freedom. Yet in that vertigo, Kierkegaard believed, lay the possibility for authentic faith. To choose trust in the face of uncertainty. To choose goodness even when the outcome is unclear. Jean-Paul Sartre took a different, more radical stance. In his existentialism, there was no divine plan waiting behind the curtain. No cosmic script. Only raw, relentless freedom. Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to be free, forever responsible for the meanings they create, the lives they build, the consequences they inherit. Freedom, in Sartre's world, was absolute and terrifying. There was no fallback, no safety net, only us, choosing, acting, becoming. Yet somewhere between Kierkegaard's leap of faith and Sartre's bleak independence, another voice rises, the voice of the Bhagavad Gita. In this ancient Hindu text, the warrior Arjuna stands paralyzed by moral conflict. Before him lies a battlefield, family against family, friend against friend. Frozen by indecision, Arjuna turns to Krishna, who offers this paradoxical guidance. Act, but surrender the outcome. Do your duty, make your choice, step forward with integrity, and then release the results into the hands of the divine. Freedom of action, surrender of attachment, a delicate, liberating balance. Somewhere in these intersecting philosophies, a universal theme emerges. We are free to choose, but we are never free from the impact of our choices. Freedom is not the absence of boundaries. It is the space between stimulus and response, a sacred pause where we decide who we want to become. Sometimes the most significant spiritual shifts begin with the smallest human choices, not in grand acts of sacrifice or life-altering decisions, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching, like choosing to pause before reacting in anger, like deciding to tell the truth when a lie would be easier, like offering kindness to someone who may never return it. We often imagine that spiritual growth happens in temples, cathedrals, or under the gaze of the stars. But more often, it happens in grocery store aisles, in awkward conversations, in moments when we stand at the crossroads between what feels good and what feels right. I remember one day, ordinary, forgettable in every way, running late for an appointment. My mind was already 2 steps ahead, rehearsing excuses and calculating time. As I rushed down the sidewalk, I noticed an elderly man struggling to lift a bag of groceries into the trunk of his car. For a split second, I hesitated. It would have been so easy to keep walking, to justify my absence with busy schedules and looming responsibilities. But something inside me tugged. A small, inconvenient nudge. I turned around, helped him load the bags, offered a smile, listened to his brief story about how his wife used to do the shopping before she got too sick to leave the house. It was just a few minutes, but as I walked away, something inside me felt different. Not heroic, not saintly, just connected to something larger, something that felt like alignment, like tuning in to the frequency of the divine. The Urantia Book describes this as cooperation with the adjuster within. Those small moments when we choose to act in harmony with the whispering guidance of the divine spark planted inside us. Freedom, then, is not about making any choice we please. It's about making the choice that draws us closer to who we were always meant to become. Each decision, each yes and no, each act of courage or compassion is a thread we weave into the tapestry of our own soul's evolution. Sartre might say that such moments define our essence. Kierkegaard would call them existential leaps toward authentic selfhood. The Bhagavad Gita would remind us that we cannot control the ripple effects, but we can control the action itself. And Urantia would quietly affirm that each conscious, loving choice is a step toward the realization of our eternal purpose. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what small decision lies before me today that could carry a larger spiritual weight than I realize? A phone call to someone lonely, an apology long overdue, a promise to show up for yourself, for another, for truth. The divine doesn't erase your freedom. It honors it. It empowers it. And every time you choose love, honesty, courage, or kindness, you align a little more with that greater will. The power is yours. The invitation is constant. And with each decision, you participate in the ongoing, beautiful unfolding of your own soul. Chapter 10, Love as the Path, the only true access to God. If there is one thread that runs through every sacred text, every philosophical musing, every whispered prayer in the dark, it is this: love. Not romantic love, not the fleeting surge of affection that burns bright and fades fast, but something older, deeper, foundational, the kind of love that breathes galaxies into being, the kind that holds suffering without flinching, the kind that whispers to every lost and wandering heart, "You are still mine." The Urantia Book, in all its complexity, cosmic language, and philosophical depth, ultimately circles back to this single, seismic truth. God is love, not simply that God loves, not that love is one among many of his attributes, but that love is his very nature. Every act of creation, every thread of divine law, every whisper of guidance, every fragment of beauty, every moment of grace, all of it flows from this single source. Mystics across ages and traditions have reached the same conclusion. The Christian mystic Julian of Norwich, writing from a small cell in 14th century England, declared with unwavering certainty, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Her vision of God was not of wrath, but of intimate, boundless love. The Sufis, spinning in their sacred dances, chant of the beloved, the one whose love is both pursuit and homecoming. For Rumi, God was not a distant observer, but the very flame that ignites the human soul. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. In the Vedantic traditions of India, the relationship between Atman and Brahman, the self and the infinite, is described as the reunion of separated love, a cosmic remembering, God is not reached by logic alone, not by intellectual gymnastics, not by ritual performance. God is reached by love. But love, in this context, is not passive. It is not just something we feel. It is something we do, a posture we choose, a bridge we build, not just between ourselves and others, but between ourselves and the divine. When we choose forgiveness over resentment, when we offer kindness without expectation, when we sit with someone's pain without trying to fix it, we step into the current of that original cosmic love. And in doing so, we touch God, not in abstraction, but here, now, in the dirt and glory of human experience. The great paradox of spiritual growth is that the most profound truths are often the simplest. Love is one of them. It doesn't require advanced theological training. It doesn't demand mystical visions or transcendent moments on mountaintops. It asks for something much harder: presence, vulnerability, action. To love is to risk. It means stepping into spaces where we might be misunderstood. It means offering when there's no guarantee of return. It means seeing the divine not just in sunsets and scriptures, but in the difficult coworker, in the crying child at the grocery store, in the stranger who cuts us off in traffic. The Urantia Book reminds us that God's love is not theoretical. It moves, it acts, it creates. If we are to truly know God, we cannot stay on the sidelines of love. We must participate. Every loving act becomes a small mirror, reflecting the character of the universal Father. Each time we choose compassion over indifference, patience over irritation, forgiveness over bitterness, we align more closely with the source from which all love flows. In the mystical Christian tradition, love is often called the ladder to God. St. John of the Cross spoke of the dark night of the soul, where love becomes both the wound and the healer. In Sufism, love is a drunken longing, a state where the soul becomes so consumed with desire for the beloved that separation becomes unbearable. In Vedanta, love is the dissolving of the ego, a recognition that what we love in others is the same divine essence residing in us. In each path, love isn't something we chase. It's something we embody. So today, before rushing into the next obligation, before returning to your to-do list, before letting this chapter become just another idea in your mind, pause and ask yourself, what is one small, concrete act of love I can offer today? Maybe it's sending a message to someone you've neglected. Maybe it's offering a genuine compliment. Maybe it's listening, truly listening, without preparing your next reply. Maybe it's forgiving yourself for something you've carried for too long. Whatever it is, let it be intentional. Let it be real. Let it be a thread connecting you to others and to God. Because in the end, every spiritual path, every sacred book, every philosophical insight brings us back to this simple, radical truth. Love is the way home. And every time we choose it, no matter how small the gesture, we take one more step toward the heart of the divine. Chapter 11, The Unity Behind Diversity, an interphilosophical dialogue. It's easy to look at the landscape of world religions and see only difference. Different texts, different rituals, different languages for God, different doctrines about sin, salvation, destiny, and the shape of the universe. We build categories. We draw boundaries. We divide, even in our spiritual longing. But beneath the layers of history, politics, and human interpretation, there runs something deeper, a shared pulse, a common yearning, a single luminous thread. The Urantia Book speaks of this unity with elegant boldness. It teaches that all sincere spiritual seeking, regardless of culture, theology, or philosophical framework, ultimately reaches toward the same source, the universal Father, the first cause, the center from which all meaning, all being, all love flows. This is not a call to erase differences. It's an invitation to recognize the shared foundation beneath them. In Buddhism, the language is quiet, uncluttered. The Buddha speaks of the end of suffering, of enlightenment, of awakening to the interconnectedness of all things. The divine, as described in Urantia, may not be named directly in Buddhism, but the journey toward compassion, mindfulness, and liberation echoes with unmistakable resonance. The Stoics speak less of gods and more of logos, the rational ordering principle behind the cosmos. To live in harmony with logos is to live in virtue, to accept reality, to participate consciously in the unfolding order. The Urantia Book calls this same force the supreme, the expression of evolving deity within time and space. Christianity, especially in its mystical traditions, speaks of union with God, of grace freely given, of a love that transcends human failure and invites intimacy with the divine. It is hard to read the Urantia Book's descriptions of the Universal Father without hearing familiar echoes of the God that Jesus called Abba, the tender, accessible Father. And then there is the mystic heart of Islam, Sufism, where the divine is the beloved, the intimate friend, the unseen companion who dances behind every sorrow and joy, where love burns away the illusion of separation, where every breath is a chance to say, "Here I am." Each path, with its own metaphors, its own language, its own sacred stories, and yet beneath all that, the same hunger for meaning, for connection, for truth, for God. The Urantia Book dares to say what many have felt but few have said so plainly, that all sincere spiritual quests are streams flowing back toward the same ocean. Not because all beliefs are identical, but because the source of all things remains one. There's a story I often return to when thinking about spiritual diversity. It's the story of Maya, a woman I met during a retreat years ago. Maya wasn't what you'd call traditionally religious. Her bookshelf was a collage of worldviews. A worn Bible with handwritten notes in the margins. A copy of the Bhagavad Gita, its pages dog-eared and loved. A small, translated collection of Rumi's poetry. A pocket-sized copy of the Dhammapada, kept in her bag like a quiet companion. And tucked at the bottom of the stack, the Urantia Book. Maya wasn't looking for a single, perfect doctrine. She wasn't trying to assemble a new religion from borrowed parts. She was listening to each voice, to each tradition, to the recurring whispers that surfaced no matter where she turned. She told me about mornings spent in silent meditation, drawing from Buddhist breath practices, afternoons contemplating Stoic acceptance, reminding herself that while she couldn't control life's external events, she could control her inner response. Evenings lost in Christian contemplative prayer, where she simply sat and let herself be loved. And on nights when existential doubt would creep in, she would open Urantia and read about the Universal Father, about the thought adjuster within her, about the cosmic family that claimed her as their own. For Maya, there was no contradiction in this weaving, no fear of inconsistency. She believed, deep in her bones, that God was big enough to speak through many languages. That truth had many doorways, but only one home. She would often say, "I'm not trying to find the right path. I'm trying to walk with an open heart on whatever path love shows me today." And isn't that the point? The more we look, the more we listen, the more we sit with the mystics, the philosophers, the poets, and the prophets, the more we start to see it, beneath the surface differences, beneath the names and metaphors, beneath the theological arguments and cultural expressions. There is one source, one love, one God, expressed in ways as diverse as humanity itself, but always reaching toward the same destination: union, growth, return. So wherever you are right now, whatever your background, your doubts, your traditions, or lack thereof, know this: your questions are part of the path. Your curiosity is holy. Your longing is shared by millions across time and space. We are all, in our own ways, wading through the rivers of our traditions, all flowing back toward the same vast, waiting ocean. And in that, there is hope, there is belonging, and above all, there's love. Chapter 12, Toward Infinity, the inner journey continues. Every journey, no matter how long, eventually circles back to where it began. But we return changed, wiser, softer, stronger in the places where we once broke, more curious in the spaces where we once claimed certainty. And as we arrive here, at the edge of this chapter, but never the end of the story, it's time to pause and breathe in all that we've uncovered. We've spoken of God's omnipresence, the quiet reassurance that we are never alone, of His omnipotence, the power that sustains galaxies yet knows the weight of one human tear, of His omniscience, the cosmic mind that holds all of time and possibility and yet still listens when we whisper in the dark. We've explored His infinite generosity, His supreme will, His loving sovereignty, and the sacred tension between freedom and responsibility. We've looked at suffering, not as punishment, but as invitation. We've stood face to face with the terrifying and beautiful reality of choice. We've seen how love is not just an attribute of God, but the path to God. And through it all, a single truth rises from beneath the layers of philosophy, theology, and experience. You are part of something larger. You are known, you are loved, and you are free to continue this journey. The Urantia Book describes life as an ascending adventure, an endless opportunity to grow, to seek, to discover new dimensions of God and of self. No single book can capture all. No single path can contain it. The Universal Father is infinite, which means your relationship with Him will keep evolving. Your questions will keep deepening. Your capacity for love, for wisdom, for spiritual insight will continue expanding long after this moment, long after this life, into worlds and realities you have not yet begun to imagine. But for now, for today, it begins with one small, sacred decision: to keep going, to keep seeking, to keep saying yes, even when you're unsure what the next step looks like. Because this is not the end. This is the doorway. Before you close this chapter, let me offer one final invitation, not to an answer, but to practice. You've walked with me through vast theological landscapes, through the philosophies of East and West, through the words of mystics, thinkers, and visionaries, and through the pages of the Urantia Book, with its cosmic vision of the divine. But all of this, every metaphor, every story, every philosophical reflection, was always leading here, to your life, to your choices, to your own unique, unfolding spiritual path. So here's the practice. Take out a notebook, a journal, or open a new document, and begin writing your personal spiritual evolution plan. This isn't a rigid set of rules. It's not a checklist of dogmas. It's a living document, a space for you to articulate how you want to grow, how you want to love, and how you want to respond to the divine whisper already alive within you. Start by asking yourself, 1. What truths from this journey resonated most deeply with me? Was it God's presence, His power, His infinite love, His trust in my freedom? 2. What small, daily actions can I take to align more closely with the divine? This could be practicing gratitude, offering forgiveness, pausing for moments of silent reflection, choosing integrity in hard conversations, or simply showing kindness to a stranger. 3. In moments of struggle, what will I choose to remember about God's nature? That He is present, that He is patient, that He is guiding even when I cannot see the way. For what long-term spiritual goals feel authentic for this season of my life? Do I want to deepen my meditation practice? Study sacred texts with more consistency? Volunteer? Heal old wounds? Rebuild relationships? There is no right or wrong answer, only honesty. Remember, this journey is not about arriving at perfection. It's about walking with intention, returning again and again to love, choosing growth even when it's messy, opening your heart even when it feels risky, because you were never meant to walk this road alone. The universal Father, the source of all, walks with you, always has, always will. And finally, before we part for now, if this message touched you, if it stirred something deep within, please, if you enjoyed this content, comment below telling us where you're from. Share this with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel. We're here every day with new videos to nourish the soul and walk this infinite journey together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeking. And above all, thank you for choosing love.